Okay, it is preparing. It's loading. Takes time. Crunches some data. Right.
Hello.
Cool. All right, it works. Let me publish the stream somewhere. I don't know. In the Discord, actually. One second. All right. Cool, guys. So let's start with the bridge. Present my screen. There you go. So with the bridge. 8. Okay, let's discuss what everyone is working on. Starting with Evgeny, who's been doing working on the contracts. What have you been? What's the status, Evgeny?
So there was some problem I found with this test. So now after I change the prover contract to not accept certain proofs, there was a problem that some test files are downloaded, and actually I don't like it at all. That makes it difficult to work with them, and it's not needed. So how I understand it, whoever was writing that, they just downloaded, created many proofs and many blocks from a real node. But this is not a good approach because most of them are similar. They are not really needed to perform like a good cover, to get a good coverage. Instead, I think I need to make some manual tests that are specifically made to cover more corner cases. For example, a test with maximum number of validators, a test with different like lengths of those hash Merkle branches and so on. So to manually think of all different ways to all different kind of proofs and blocks that the code must be able to handle, and just manually make a test for each of them. And so there would be much fewer tests, and so there would be no need to download this test data. And it would be in general easier. For example, it would be possible to annotate like each of the tests with a comment what it is testing to. So if one of them fails, it would be easier to investigate.
Have you seen this pull request that I was submitting? I actually think there was a bug in Prover that I think should be fixed like that, like I suggested in one of the Slack threads. After I fixed it like this, it was actually passing all the proofs.
Yes, but I think we better have simpler prover which doesn't accept this special case. It should still be usable, but less opportunity for bugs. Also, in the same pull request, you remove that git check, but it essentially makes that test useless, because what it is testing is that contracts in dist directory are the same that are generated during the CI. But if you remove that git command, that this test stops testing for that. So after that it only tests that it compiles, but well, it's
Yeah.
not as useful.
Yeah, I mean, I left a comment there which refers to yarn bug that says that yarn is actually inconsistent, so we cannot really rely on it.
So, well, I think I know how to fix this, but the idea that is that git call actually check if any files changed. So not just log file, but also if this build step changes the content of the contents of the dist directory.
Okay. Well, okay, let's follow up that pull request. So actually, so you're saying that you want to keep it like this because this is more complex?
Yes. Also, I think in the future I want to simplify the bridge itself and probably remove block hashes, because if you remove this complexity, you currently prover doesn't need block hashes, it only needs block Merkle roots. So I think it is possible to remove block hashes in the future.
Okay, I see. Okay. Okay, cool. I mean, I see. Right, we need to decide what to do with this pull request, though, because if we just like revert this change, the tests are gonna fail. Decide, but let's do it asynchronously. Decide what to do with. Discuss asynchronously. Right. So, Marcella, what have you been up to?
Yes, I see from what I hear from Evgeny that there is quite some intersection in what I'm doing and what Evgeny have done. I've been trying to understand how I'm still onboarding, but mostly on the part of understanding how Ethereum works, the logs and the proof, to try to build these kind of corner cases, because we already understand that this fixed proof might not be enough to check that our test is safe. So, like, I'm working on these two issues, which try to create our custom serialization and the serialization that adds that will allow us to add these corner cases. But I need to check with Evgeny if he has already done that, because maybe we not need to double this effort.
You're doing kind of symmetric things, but they're different codes, because what he is doing, he's working with Solidity contracts, and he's verifying Merkle paths from near and execution outcomes from near. You're doing you're verifying events from Ethereum and Merkle Patricia paths from Ethereum. So it's like similar concept, but completely different code.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, I mean, but you might still want to check with Evgeny to seek some inspiration of how you want to organize things. If he wants to move away from Ethereum dumps, then yes, near dumps, then we need. Actually, we have issues in Rainbow repository about verifying all events from Ethereum starting from the last fork that they had, which I think is a great idea, and we should do it. I mean, Marcelo, you were in this thread in Slack. So yeah, okay. I mean, just keep in mind that that would be very useful for us, and we probably need to do it to be honest, to be safe.
We can use all the data that have been generated since the last hard fork. Yet we still need to try to stress some other cases that might not happen. Those corner cases that Evgeny was describing in the symmetric case might also apply for our case. So
it's even more severe in your case, because in your case you're working with Merkle Patricia tree, and you also have this RLP encoding that has special cases in there with like zeros and empty strings and everything. So you're gonna have many more special cases with this path than Evgeny. All right, Vlad, did you have a chance to start working on the bridge?
So essentially, I started with onboarding, as you suggested, with CLI and Leap follow-up, Rainbow Bridge Leap, I mean. And we had a short discussion today with Alex KPR to identify what are the shortcomings and how to better address those. Alex actually prepared a document describing the plan, how we could split the current CI into two entities. The development one that we need for our infrastructure deploy, starting the bridge and maintaining it, and then another CLI, which is user-facing one with a separate versioning and stability guarantees. So yeah, that's on the sort of planning and design side of things.
Yes.
Yeah, as we discussed yesterday, I started with following the whole process of setting up the bridge from scratch and identified some pitfalls here and there, just small needs or find details that we need to clarify in README, but nothing more than that yet.
Okay, well, that's fine. All right, Alex, you're here. Welcome back.
Hi there. So yeah, I'm happy to join again. Yeah, so now I'm collecting insights from what's happened last 2 weeks and what is the most important. So I already had some conversation with Marcelo, Vlad, Alex, and so I will have some of them today later. Yeah, so in my focus for now, two important things. So I want to suggest to finalize our vision of the whole architecture. I mean, some high-level view of Rainbow Bridge stuff. Yeah, so as you Max previously pointed at Slack, that it's important to make it stop at some point, to stop and say, okay, here is our architecture and it's what we deliver for our customers. And I see lots of issues related to it. So what we currently have is far from optimal, and we can easily bring lots of value by simply separate things better. And I want to discuss it with Frol more with you, with Evgeny Kapun, and then to decide together, I guess, next week we will completely decide and make a full stop there. And the other direction I want to go into is building testing infrastructure close to Marcelo.
Yeah, so Marcelo also is going to be working on, like high-level design, so he has to be part of the discussion too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would like to finalize something and then to share in Slack to collect more thoughts.
All right, so let me open this criteria for the mainnet launch that I have created.
I just want to call out quick. Like I didn't make it to the meeting last week, but I know there was a lot of discussion on it, I think on the same topic that you were just talking about, KPR. So Alex Shevchenko and I had a meeting like last Wednesday and kind of came up with our own idea. So I'm not saying it's a good idea or the best idea, but I think maybe it can inform the discussion that you and Evgeny and Marcelo are going to have.
Yeah, Alex Koprin, you might want to first sync with Chad and Alex Shevchenko because they are presenting.
Absolutely. I've already synced with Alex Shevchenko, and I will have a discussion with Chad today later. And so personally, I want to discuss with everyone what everyone sees the most important, and then to combine everything together to not lose voice of everyone. So here is my feeling about it.
Yeah, you might want to like split discussions in two so that we don't have one big meeting with like, I don't know, 7 people. You can have like a talk with like Chad and Alex Shevchenko first because they're doing like product management here. And then have the same kind of conversation with like Marcelo, me, and Vlad Frolov and Evgeny Kaplan.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, so let's look at this minute criteria that I have updated to make sure actually everyone agrees with it, right? Whether we want to modify it or not. So you see, it has a very high focus on upgradability, which is currently mostly done by Evgeny Kaplan, because he's the person working on the Solidity contracts, which would require a lot of change for the upgradability. And we also don't have any patterns for the upgradability for the near contracts, which we need to first come up with. Then the usability part, here I actually decided to put like very little focus on it because I think we can launch it on the mainnet first, and only like then decide later how exactly we want to restructure the libraries and CLIs and all that. So I don't think the discussion on what is the split of the libraries so the CLI should affect the launch on the mainnet. And then the third one, I think it's just like maybe the most important part here is that we need to get to the point where we have separate CIs on our repos as fast as possible, because it slows down people a lot. The fact that they have CI only on the CLI repo that's being triggered by all other repos. The Evgeny Kaplan was blocked by this and by me for like 10 days because he made a API change to the Solidity, and then he had to make the change to the lib and CLI, and there was like problems with synchronizing all that, publishing packages and debugging it. So that was quite painful. And also, until we get separate CIs for all these repos, we're gonna have human errors, which we already had a week ago. We had 2 human errors, right? I don't know, Alex, whether you know what happened, but we published.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, we published the correct version, and then we published again correct version. So we gotta fix this first. Then we need to fix upgradability. Ideally, have some monitoring. Mario, you're here, right? Monitoring for the breach, which is like super rudimental. You know, just like track what is the most recent header that was submitted to the client on one side and the client on another side.
Yeah, that's planned in pipeline. I'm currently stuck with upgrading the near up. Sandy pushed a fix to the master. So we have a pinned version of near up currently in Rainbow Bridge, which is fairly old, like 3 or 4 months, but it's okay for local development. I made a new PR, which is broken. Something's not working, so I'm reworking the test in some way. So like, because test just runs a bunch of stuff, like it runs 5, like it runs near up, ganache, initialize the contracts, and it doesn't check for anything. It just runs the commands. So like, it's very hard to debug, like, because you don't know if the smart contracts are initialized and so those kind of things. And we can actually reuse the stuff from status command to see if everything is initialized as it should be before we even run the test.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you should ask for help from Alex Koprin to unblock you on the near up upgrade.
He's not blocking me, like because I've done something for sure, but I'm not sure what.
Oh, okay.
Because I tested the master.
I thought I was
master
blocking
is
you.
working.
Yeah,
like
interesting.
I don't know.
Well, the other thing that we need to do. So one big thing that we need to all of us keep in mind is that hackathon is still not over. I mean, it's over, but the participants have not been evaluated yet, which means their projects need to continue working. Like what happened actually, which was not great, is that we forked the testnet, right? Because we thought that the hackathon was over, and that obviously broke the bridge in irreversible fashion. Which means that all of the projects, the whole participants stopped working. After they submitted them already, but we haven't evaluated them yet. So now we had to communicate to all of them new config for the bridge, just so that they would be able to upgrade it and we would be able to evaluate them. Hackathon participants still not evaluated, and we need to keep bridge running for them.
Yeah, like now you reminded me something. How do you run the bridge? You run it on your own on some machine?
Yeah, I run it in one of the Google Cloud instances. I just like
I looked it up.
I'm doing my monitoring myself, so that's why we need some help from you.
Yeah. So you deployed it for testnet only, so there isn't any instance for mainnet.
No, not yet. I mean, that's exactly the criteria for the mainnet launch is this one.
Okay.
We can launch it. So the thing that we've been telling partners is that we can launch it like technically now. It's just if like once we have an upgrade on the bridge, they would need to do manual migration, which is going to be like difficult. But if someone like absolutely urgently needs like mainnet bridge, we can deploy it. It's just we're gonna ask them
but
do not use too much assets.
On that. Okay.
Yeah, they're gonna be stuck on it. And so yeah, until we have upgradability, probably shouldn't be launching like the official version of the bridge. But once we have it, we can do it. So that's like one thing, Alex Coprin, that we should agree on is that for the mainnet launch, I think we don't need to be blocked on the work on how we're gonna structure CLIs and the library. It's all about the upgradability, which is a lot of work. Actually, we probably need more than Evgeny Kapun work in there because it's also Rust side. There is need to define the interfaces. I think Evgeny Kapun estimated that it will take him 3 months. Is it right, Evgeny, to do the upgradability? Or was it something else?
It's not precisely the upgradability. The problem is that whatever you try to do in the current code base, you are running into problem with the current code base, like what I described with tests. This kind of problems are everywhere, and every time you try to change something, you need to also fix something else for that to work.
So the upgradability is basically is significantly slowed down, I would say. English is slowed down by.
So it sounds like it might.
Go ahead.
It sounds like it might actually speed it up if we did some refactoring of like how the tests are done and that kind of thing, even on a 3-month time scale.
Well, what we need to do is split CIs. That's the thing. I mean, that's the refactoring, right? Each repo needs to have an independent set of CIs in such a way that, like, you don't need to run end-to-end tests in the CLI to make sure that your Solidity contracts are actually not broken.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so like we had a very long discussion last time, but like the CI thinks they're going to help, but like it's not stable enough, and it's going to break across repos, and then it's like a bottleneck in itself. Like you cannot land one PR simultaneously on 2 repos.
Yeah. So the safety thing, I would say, is P0 for us, which is needed for the upgradability to go faster. All right. Good.
I have a quick update on 2 fronts that I'd like to squeeze in if I can. One, for a partner that's hoping to launch their own product on near next summer, they need like a fiat on-ramp by January. And I think I'll be having a meeting with MoonPay and Wire, 2 fiat on-ramps that are currently on Ethereum, about building a like native version on Near, and I anticipate that they will just need to be able to send like DAI across the bridge, across a like stable mainnet bridge. And the timeline for that would be like end of this year. So that seems like what we're kind of targeting for a fairly stable version on mainnet.
Maybe
just wanted to
even,
like,
yeah, maybe even very stable version. Sorry.
Yeah. So I don't anticipate problems with that. I just wanted to like note that I'm plan to kind of put that out there as a date that partners can rely on. And the second thing is that I have been able to work on the front end again. I moved it to the Near organization, so it's now at Near/Rainbow Bridge front end. And Vlad Grachina helped me update some of the Borsch handling. I'll be cleaning up the rest of the Borsch handling, but rather than having it duplicated in like the Borsch.js and Borschifyproof.js, I was able to get rid of a bunch of that so far, and I anticipate getting rid of like the rest of it because it has already been added to Near API.js with like some minor hiccups that I'm helping address. So cool. That's what's happening probably today. And then I'll also be the generic contracts are now, the generic token connector is now deployed to testnet, correct? So
no,
that's
not
what's next for me. Not yet. Okay. That I'm not blocked yet, but I'll be blocked within a day or two. So if that's not on testnet.
Yeah. So what happens right now is that we might need to deploy like generic token connector, but still tell all the hackathon participants that continue using whatever you're currently using, because when they started building, there was no generic token connector, and so they're not using generic token connector; they're using the regular token connector. So we're gonna have the config that is going to be in the README file in our repo is not going to be the one that hackathon participants are going to be using. Yeah. So that's
all right. We can talk about that in Slack or something and figure out what the path is there. Maybe we can have a release branch. That would be fine with me. I did publish a new version. Like I'm adding versioning to Rainbow Bridge front end, and I published 1.1.0. And it's using a new contract. So if you had already sent some like the abundance token from Ethereum to your Near wallet, it will no longer show up. Your Near balance is blank because it's a new contract. Since it's testnet, I don't think anyone cares. But I just wanted to like point out that from the app perspective, that's sort of a breaking change. Like from the user perspective, that's a breaking change. But I don't think that's the perspective we should be using in those release notes.
You should check whether its UI still works, because I don't think it is, right? The bridge was broken by the testnet fork, and I just restarted it.
I'll double check that. Yeah.
Okay. Alex Roshenko, what you've been up to?
Yeah. So the short update from my side is that I was creating the document with the needs of the different use cases. So you for sure have seen it, and I believe lots of the people have seen it. Thanks for everybody for the feedback. I'm continuously updating this thing. A very major thing that we need to pay our attention to is the ability to bridge the Near NAP tokens, NAP21 tokens, with the Near ERC20 tokens. So so in other words, the tokens that we have bridged from Ethereum, we need to be able to bridge them in between EVM and WASM. So this is additional thing, and I believe we need to take care of this inside of the architecture. And I'm going to work the next week on consulting with our partners and trying to get some feedback from them on the functionality. The second thing is that I would like to work with all of you in order to create some kind of a roadmap that we would be able to communicate outsiders. So this would be something that our partners can rely on and plan their workload. And this actually stands. This holds true for both the bridge and EVM, because like they are going hand by hand.
Yeah, this is a separate scope. We definitely need to discuss it and scope it separately. Like in ZenHub, it can be a separate epic with like large number of issues, GitHub issues, to be work items. Yeah, so semantically, like we should treat it as semantically separate scope. All right.
Yeah,
because
but
that might be, yeah, go ahead.
This part is important for EVM at the moment because it seems like
Yes.
the EVM is going to be released sooner than Bridge.
Yes.
So we need to take care of the like things in the EVM to implement everything that we need for the Bridge. So it is worth thinking of this from the architecture standpoint. Yeah.
It just seems to me like it's separate from the Bridge. Like this thing might be useful even if we didn't have Bridge, right? Being able to connect your C20 in the VM with NEP21 outside, it's a good thing overall. So
yeah, but specifically for those Bridge tokens, why it's especially important is because those Bridge tokens are already like a mintable tokens on our side, and if we create a separate, pretty much like the tokens inside near EVM and tokens outside that both are bridge tokens, they need to know about each other. And so we either like rely on this going forward with upgradability, or we think through it at least ahead of time.
Upgradability. You're saying this upgradability of the bridge will somehow be relevant to this?
No, I'm saying that like the bridge token. Let's say we have a DAI in an NAP21 DAI token that is bridged, and we have a DAI inside near EVM. This DAI, these two contracts need to know about each other, and ideally they should be deployed by the same factory.
Yep.
So the only way to do it is to either do it from ahead of time, or we'll need to like fix it up later with a lot of hackery.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Hence thinking through it ahead of time.
Yes, that's actually absolutely true. They have to be hard linked to each other. So when that's why it actually depends on the bridge, because bridge contracts need to be hard linking it, because then we cannot do it post facto. Actually realized we spilled over into next meetings. I'm very sorry, everyone. Let's end this meeting now, and I don't know, take 1 minute break and then start the next meeting, which is transaction runtime, right? I think. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks,
cool.
everybody.
Thanks, guys. All right, Evgeny, you want to take it from here?
Sure. What happened? What is this? It's sharing something else. Clearly not what I wanted. Okay. All right. Much better. Okay. So the big work item for transaction runtime this week was mostly upgrading fees. There some work that was done on this front. So first I have a PR to refactor runtime class. I moving runtime config out of it to apply state. So what it does is it changes, it allows us to apply state essentially, or like apply transaction based on different configs. So in order to upgrade fees, we need to pass a new config, and previously runtime was owning, the class was owning the config, and now it will be passed from runtime adapter, essentially, where the runtime is called. And it doesn't have to be part of apply state, but because it kind of some context that there, then it makes sense to have it there. And then I added a new method that essentially takes the current Genesis config and the protocol version, and if the protocol version gonna exceed well, maybe I need to pass a Genesis protocol version as well, but when it's gonna exceed the protocol version on which you wanna do the upgrade, then it's gonna swap the config or upgrade the default config. Because, for example, testnet and mainnet still uses different configs. They use different storage state. Mainnet storage is more expensive than testnet storage.
That is already fixed.
What do you mean fixed? On testnet, it's more expensive now?
No, it's the same now.
Well, I mean the same as mainnet?
Yep.
Okay. Cool. So, well, that's better, but we still probably want to upgrade it only by replacing the fields that are changed instead of overwriting all the fields within runtime config. Then there is a net on upgrading fees. Let's see. This. So it basically talks about what we want to do this time, and it's missing one point, which is we may want to bundle upgrade. We may want to change the deploy of empty contract produces default crypto hash, but other than this, it should be okay. And it's slightly one of the things that may be a little different. But here's the like big changes that we're gonna do. So we will remove essentially runtime compilation cost by setting it to 0, and instead bump deploy cost by adding a compilation cost there. So the deploy action will be already including the compilation, so it doesn't have to change the code, at least until we start doing any real caching and compilation. It also means that this change can go without the actual disk cache implementation, while it may make us more susceptible to like cold cache attacks. In reality, they not clear if they may happen or not. But we can also bundle them together. Then there are a bunch of improvements on a param estimator front, which we removed the base cost from different actions. So for example, a function call action will not include the compilation cost and will not include the cost to create a receipt, and then brings down fees a lot. So there is a net to upgrade fees. And the final item that I was working on is RAM disk versus SSD performance. And I ran it first with the iCount default config, which is 20K accounts with one iteration, and that was incorrectly measured. Then I started running it with something like 4 million accounts in a try, where I discovered that RocksDB has an issue, be single-threaded. Then for Genesis populate, we disabled single-threaded RocksDB, and this issue shifted to actual param estimator. Used with 22 using time metric. So I'm currently stuck on this. I tried to like reconfigure RocksDB for single-threaded to increase the limits, but I'm hitting a stall of writes, and we cannot issue a compaction because it always has to go in a separate thread. So, so I asked Bo to look into this, and we'll try to figure out how to resolve it. For now, there's few things. So actual final param estimation. So for this, we need to shift compilation into deploy action. So we don't need to actually compile within deploy within param estimator, so long as we just account compilation properly, and then get runtime function call to 0. So, and I want to run it with 10 million plus try. This iCount, and multiply it by coefficient based on SSD divided by RAM. So my current experiments, from what it was able to complete on time, was the disk is like 20% more expensive than from like 10 to 20% more expensive on 4 million accounts in time for default actions. So this like lookup and stuff. So it's not as bad, but we probably can include some safety coefficient. So once I actually can complete it, maybe I'll enable RocksDB threads to just like run it for now and see how I get it. So once this is merged, this part is pretty much shouldn't be a big problem, but we'll need to write a few integration tests to verify if this has switched. And this part needed.
So our plan with delayed receipts is that even if receipt was produced a long time ago with old config, when it's actually being executed, we're going to be using the new config for it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which is probably
fine.
Because
fee is going to go down, so that's not going to be an issue. So you can only abuse it if like a deploy cost is like if you do a bunch of deploys, but because right now deploy is free, so all the previous deployed accounts are essentially also not accounted for this. So that's not a critical part. So yeah, this part of the upgrade, it doesn't touch the config structure. So that's easier upgrade that we might face in the future when we add a new field into the config, because at this time we'll have to introduce another wrapper on top of runtime config that will switch it from being at least in the runtime, it will have to be reset somehow, or like use default fields and like deprecate old fields by setting them to 0. But that will be later once we actually have new metric that we need to measure.
What is the state right now with adding disk cache for the contra compilation? Remember, like, have you seen the comment that I left based on the conversation with Misha about the singleton thing?
So I haven't looked into this, but I think Bo can talk about this.
Yeah, Bo is not here. Yes, so basically Misha has a very valid point, I think. Oh, I told you already, right?
Yeah.
Very valid point why we shouldn't be using singleton. Just writing it with the arguments.
But okay. The idea, it's kind of like it's similar how we're going to use it. It's just going to be a trait that behind the scenes uses implementation that uses singleton, kind of not real singleton, but it will use a store.
Yes.
Like caching.
I mean, but yeah, it should have it.
Yeah,
it should depend on a trait there. Yeah. Okay.
But we can put it into runtime inner structure. So because it's kind of like a singleton, except it's not. It can be owned by a runtime class, like structure. So it can be accessible instead of passed through every time. It still need to propagate to like Wasmer, which we may want to do some refactoring there to introduce like some common object.
Yeah. We actually need to decide almost like on philosophical level here, whether we are passing things all the time for the arguments to the runtime, or we store it in the fields that we initialize during the constructor, because runtime is a very simple state machine from the interface perspective. It's just you have a constructor and then you have one apply method that you trigger. So
yeah. So I was thinking about like actually refactoring this all. Right now it's just a bunch of methods. Like once I remove the config, it's essentially stateless completely. So there's no reason to keep it at all in memory.
Interesting.
Because it doesn't own anything. But instead, we should probably construct something like a apply state and have methods on top of apply state, or because this is like a one-time object, which is your state, that actually takes the transaction and shift them to something new.
Yeah, that apply state will introduce, like we already have lots of interactions. Like we have try update, we have a storage update. We might have something else, and then we're gonna have apply state, which is also kind of the intermediate.
No, so yeah. So essentially, when you do runtime apply, it's kind of a lifetime of when apply begins, and then it should turn itself into a result at the end. So it should destruct itself. So we can construct a temporary object that owns the try update, this proper lifetimes, and like try, apply state, and other stuff. And then at the end, it just destructs itself and turns it into apply result, of the name of the final structure, or an error if it fails to do. And then you can think about like a Moonglow scheduler that will take this object and just throw a bunch of new applies on top, instead of like passing all of this again and again in a loop as arguments.
So basically, apply
once once the block completes, essentially you just have one object that you turn into a result.
So basically, this class that you want to introduce will be what our runtime I thought is, or like intended to be. Is it? I thought the runtime was stateless, but I mean, it makes more sense to be more explicit about what is actually is a state, and call it a state instead of the runtime.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it should just own the current like beginning state, and then once it completes, and then we can refactor some stuff like into separate methods, like apply transaction first, then apply receipts, and then and it can have a state machine there to clear seed order, and then like check balances at the end.
Okay. All right.
And it all, in theory, will be a no protocol change, but it may be easier to read than like one big apply method without state.
All right.
I'll put it as to do for refactoring. One block state-based transition. Something like this. Let's see. This mouse. So from last week to do, so this is done, this is not done, and I don't think we're gonna go for this, so we can ignore it.
Okay.
Because we decided to go for a sharded approach. And this is the PR, or like issue for this, so that's okay. So network and disk. It's another overhead.
Well, I mean, I think Max proposed something that's kind of temporarily mitigates this problem. I think Max proposed to have a maximum size of the chunk. so that I mean at least the abuse part will be kind of mitigated.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I was thinking about like persistent storage, and I think we can discuss this. I guess we have a research tomorrow for this. But it seems like from archival node perspective, this process of persistent storage and state sync is not as well priced in. So like archival nodes essentially will have to keep all of the state, even so like normal nodes do not. And pricing of so the persistent state cost is relatively high comparing to like a transaction cost per byte. Yeah. All right, so we'll discuss this separately. Okay, so for this one, we may fix it through a different limit. And once I have like a better understanding on this numbers, I'll probably have this PR next, and then next week we'll get there. It is a fee upgrade protocol change.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's take a break.
Thank you again.
Hey guys.
Hey, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, sure. One sec. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so I'm transitioning to Bridge initiative, so my involvement in node interfaces will be minimal, but still I want to allocate some resources on it. Bogdan is still working full-time on Indexer, so let's hear what we have there. It's exciting to see how it progresses.
We have currently managed to get like feature complete Explorer indexer, similar to current implementation we have. With every feature it has currently, plus with the receipts which absent on current implementation. So we have deployed it for every network we have: testnet, mainnet, betanet, and currently we are working on stabilization of Explorer indexer. But for now, like it is running more than an hour already, and it seems like quite stable and current, and seems to be up to date with the network. So maybe we won't be stabilizing it because it's quite stable already.
Yeah, I still wanted to see how it performs on betanet, since I've seen today we had over 33 million transactions on betanet just for a single day. So we will have quite a stress test for the indexer this way. Yeah, I anticipated the indexer will lag behind on saving the data into the database because we already observed such an issue previously using render. We still use render for hosting the database just to be closer to the potential reader, which is a Explorer, which is deployed on render right now. But it seems like our tricks to have some like overlap in handling the messages from streamer essentially worked. We will see how it progresses and how much space it will consume in Postgres and how Postgres will handle it. So I would say it's an early stage of like having some final conclusions on the stabilization, but so far it's performing pretty good. And as Bogdan mentioned, yeah, it's feature complete with the current Explorer backend. So we unblock Explorer team on this part, and they can start like essentially, well, Ifan can start working on it, migrating the internal storage from using SQLite to using Postgres database provided by Indexer. Well, anyway, we'll finish up this section later. On Rosetta RPC side of things, it was mostly maintenance. And we I fixed a few bugs, like small issues, and we unblock the partners. So far, they are like Rosetta RPC has no blocking issues on our side. We are waiting for review from the partner to see whether it's suitable for them, where they found any issues. So it's currently in a like maintenance mode, reacting to any input we have from the partner. No active work is done there. And there is a telemetry issue that I mentioned last week, and fortunately I haven't had a bandwidth to look into it this week. Hopefully we'll have some opportunity like tomorrow or maybe on Monday to debug it. And also I've like it's not the recent change, but I mean not the last week change, but it's quite recent, and I forgot to mention it before. JSON RPC received a policy rules on adding new methods, upgrading, removing the existing ones. It's right here in JSON RPC README. So we guarantee that all the non-experimental endpoints will remain the same to produce the same outputs and accept the same inputs. We can extend those in a non-breakable way, meaning that we still support the legacy, same order, same types input, and producing the same output as before. But we encourage to probably use experimental prefix even for extensions. So one example of such implementation was recent, like the thing Bowen implemented last week, this experimental TX status. So essentially this TX status was exactly the same as the simple regular method TX on JSON RPC with addition of receipts. By itself, the change is non-breaking since it's adding a new field, but we agreed that in the future we may decide to have this these receipts only available on certain types of nodes, not all of them, to cut some resource usage or any other reason. So that's why we decided to create a separate endpoint with the prefix experimental, just to make sure that, partners and integrators can use it, but they need to keep an eye on the implementation and make sure like that it's up to date. On our side, we're not like playing evil policeman here. We will for sure try to make as little changes as possible, but we may hide this experimental endpoint in the future under a feature flag. It shouldn't be problematic in my point of view, but it's still good that we have this opportunity. And this experimental prefix is described in this policy as something that we may hide behind the feature flag, or just like deprecate in a release without prior notice if we find that it's blocking us on some improvements.
Are there like common conventions on how you like introduce and deprecate like experimental
yeah, so here
interfaces?
Is how you introduce a new method. Essentially, it goes through experimental prefix first. It requires to be documented in the docs, even if it's just experimental. Like every single endpoint should be documented. Also addressed in changelog. and then another stabilization of the experimental API section describing how we create an alias first. So we keep both versions of the method for some period of time. It's not defined here how we manage releases, but essentially just like try to not break it immediately. So we will have two methods doing the same thing under experimental, non-experimental name. And after we have the release table, meaning release to mainnet, I guess, for substantial time, we can drop experimental ls completely. So it will be just a one-line change, essentially, to drop ls, and everything should just keep going.
So we need to define how it's going to interplay with semantic version here of the node and like of the node library. So I know like when you don't have experimental and you just introduce the endpoint that you want and you want to deprecate the old endpoint, the convention is that you do the minor version bump, you mark the old endpoint as like soft deprecated. So there are specific steps people do. So it would be useful to also have a section here that says like how exactly we do it.
Yeah, well, in my point of view, we may not ever reach this step. We may just keep the alias forever for like 2.0 near core 2.0, and only then just go over all the aliases that are unneeded and remove them, because it's not costing us anything to keep an alias. That's how Rust does it when they want to deprecate something from standard library. They just mark it well, it's deprecated, we'll remove it in 2.0, but Rust does not have any plans to have 2.0 ever. So all the upgradability is going to be under 1.x branch. So essentially those methods will be kept forever, which is fine.
Is it? I mean, what if we add something like, let's say we had this Genesis thing, right, where we export Genesis for the API, but then we really wanted to not store Genesis in memory. So
yeah, well, this stabilization process goes over when the method has never landed into stable, meaning it has never been stabilized and this alias was not created in the first place. So we somewhere I wrote down here that we reserve our rights to remove experimental APIs just immediately with no prior notice. We will communicate it through changelog though, and that's the main idea. But,
this is so great. Can you link this document from the like landing page README file of the README? I mean, our like near core README should come together into a README of a real open source project, you know, with all the.
Do you mean this one in near core main
yeah.
one? Sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
find the place to.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Put it. Sure. And let me put it here. Yeah, that's all, I guess, on my side. Node interfaces. Well, as just a node side. So there is a discussion about near CLI rewrite in Rust. So okay, it's in private repo. We have an naps 31. Talking details about the design of possible near shell, now renamed to near CLI. proposal. And today I had some ideas how to improve it. I'll probably need to move my examples from the private repo comments to this one, to the snap discussion. But overall, like I came up with some like design how we may have interactive workflow for CLI. It essentially just keep asking questions if you have not provided the necessary arguments. So it asks whether you want to have to submit the transaction into testnet or any other network, and it asks who is the receiver, sender receiver, what kind of action you want to add to it. For a specific action, you specify some parameters, all of that, and yeah, here is the nice create in Rust, which allows to have those interactive selectors and many other types of communication with CLI tools. I find it pretty cool. And after that, I just wrote down all the like scenarios I envision, where like essentially my focus was only on signing the transaction, like constructing and signing transaction. So the simplest case we can have is when we have access to the node through RPC. We can access it to fetch nonce and recent block hash. In this case, we can use online, and also we have the secret key on our device. We can provide it as a as a parameter or as just read from file or ledger. So just one simple command, it will create the same flow as I showed above, but with all the questions automatically answered for you. So it will just educate you through the process that like I'm asking it for this input, input, and then I provide this output. Essentially, when it comes to this point, it will print the transaction itself and confirm that you want to sign it with this key, and later on it will confirm if you want to submit it into the network. So this way, I believe we will be able to educate people about our design and how at least transactions operate. Another option is to sign the transaction manually. It will print all the necessary information for you to sign the transaction offline, meaning on any other device. And it will just wait here for like your input after you. So it allows you to, it provides you with a transaction hash, which you need to sign, or with transaction base 64 encoded Borsch, which you sign on another machine and bring back this the signature here. And after like it receives the input interactively, it will just submit it for you into RPC. And two other approaches is completely offline, where you need to specify the recent block hash manually and nonce manually. This will allow the CLI to still construct the transaction, and you cannot submit it in offline mode. You can display it and then just send. It can provide you with a useful command line instruction how to send the received blob through JSON RPC. And the last one, I call it paranoid, where you can construct API in offline mode in one machine and then manually sign it on another and send it on the third one. Well, just for the sake of like completeness, it's completely like this way of structuring things enables all these 4 possible approaches. With Ledger support, it's just this place where you sign it with Ledger, not manually, and not with the sender secret key. So all the like meaningful user flows will be supported. What I want to highlight here is that having such approach will allow users to have a help command on after every single command and receive only the necessary help message, like what's the next step after this one. If they want to have it in non-interactive mode, they can construct the same command, just following the help messages. For example, on the construct transaction online help message, you will only receive the only available next step is to specify send from account ID. And when you ask send from help, it will only suggest you to use send to. After send to, it will suggest you to use transfer or create account or something else. And only after that, it will suggest you to sign the transaction and submit it. So every single time, the user is not trying to like understand the whole like existence of near CLI possible actions, but instead they can just have a short, concise README. Like this is the whole README I expect the user will read when they reach this help. It's pretty minimal, easy to understand what's your options and where to go next. So this is the way I want to have most of our tooling work on the DevX side, to be honest. And this is what we discussed today with Alex Kuprin on Near Breach CLI as well. So having a single tool which does everything is not helping anybody, in my opinion. It's better to have more tools or like clear understanding how they interoperate for different use cases, for different usages. And that's why we like for Near Breach, we think that it's better to decouple the CLI for the development, like bridge development, essentially, where Ganache and Near Core is compiled and gets running because it pulls more dependencies that the regular user essentially needs. So yeah, just short intro and like various design approaches I have in mind.
It's pretty great. I mean, I haven't used interactive CLIs much, so this is going to be a new one, a new thing for me. But yeah, I mean,
well, I think you don't have to, like you have an option to just go and submit all the arguments there, but with that,
I guess you have.
Yeah, go
ahead. If you installed Rust, you have seen interactive CLI.
Oh yeah, in fact, Rust app does this.
Oh yeah, I mean micro interactive, yeah. So that actually addresses the pain point that Sandy brought up some time ago, where he basically said that we like the feedback when people like use Ledger with our like CLI or whatever wallet. So which was most about our ledger integration, but it's a general thing that people want to have is they want to have a constant feedback and confirmation that you did something and you did something correctly. They want to be like handheld as much as possible throughout the the journey. And he's like quite experienced already with the blockchains, and that was really important for him already. Like he didn't feel comfortable just doing things blindly and hoping that the tool spits out the results at the end correctly. So everyone needs this. This is great. I also wanted to like bring up another thing, but we are out of time here, which I just wanted to make sure that we discuss it. Is that I suggested Bogdan to consider using storage procedures for the indexers on the indexer, because right now it seems like you need to do lots of performance optimizations so that indexer doesn't lag behind the blockchain, right? And like the way I see stored procedures being used, they've been used in specifically this kind of scenarios where you have data that you want to reaggregate, reindex in different ways, and like flatten, whatnot, merge. That things I saw people doing with stored procedures that would be even triggered on trigger, that would be executed on trigger, because like stored procedures are extremely optimized in the database, like the execution, like that's like one of the points of the database is to be really fast on indexes and stored procedures. So very likely if you cannot do something many cases faster than the what
yeah, in some cases. Well,
fortunately, we seem not we don't need to investigate into stored procedures, at least just yet. It's like I'm still surprised, to be honest, given we had experienced the problems with the latency on indexer for wallet, but it seems like I just checked and the indexer is working just fine. All the blocks are immediately synced. It's well, it's obvious, but it's doing it faster than the current Explorer backend, just because Explorer backend has some like polling design, which only updates every couple of seconds.
Yes.
So it's great, and kudos to Bogdan for implementing it. It's working.
Cool. Well, yeah, as long as it works, as long as you can actually make it not lag behind. But I mean, yeah, let's have like stored procedures, not maybe even as a replacement to what you have, but maybe as an addition, because anyone like it's really easy to write a plugin like this, right? If someone wants to like use indexer and just have yet another table in there that has data indexed differently or flattened differently, aggregated differently, they can add stored procedure in SQL, even if they're not familiar with Rust. And
yeah, well, it's up to the users, I guess, in terms of like our needs. We don't need it yet, but yeah, it's good to keep in mind that we have that opportunity. Still, I'm not very comfortable with making too much of a bet on Postgres as a single possible solution, and stored procedures are very DB sensitive. So.
Yes, cool. Right, I think we're getting started with another meeting soon.
Yeah.
So let's take a break, 1 minute break. Thank you a lot, Bogdan.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Hey, Nikolai, welcome back. So happy to see you.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, it's really great to see you too. I was so happy seeing like runtime team yesterday and see you all.
Yeah, we're now streaming those meetings to the YouTube, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Live on YouTube. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Have you moved to another location, or just don't recognize the background?
Oh well, yeah. It's my flat in the city. I used to be in my country house, and now I stay here.
Good.
So, yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, kick it off whenever you feel like.
Yeah. Actually, I think I can take notes today, but I probably cannot properly drive a meeting in a sense that I'm not really completely up to date to what's going on. So.
Okay. Well, you just take notes, and Willem and Bo will just give status update on what is happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna start in a couple minutes, right?
Yeah.
Or right now.
Well,
I'm ready.
All right, you're ready. Let's go.
Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay, so whenever people are ready, let's get started.
Okay, yeah, so I'm almost done with the macro for the testing. I'm just editing it right now and adding some tests. And I'm going, and I have started to look at the memory growth cost. And at our meeting yesterday, Nikolai gave me good advice on it, which is to just set up a contract that's, about to grow memory, and then, call a method that then increases its memory, the memory grow instruction, and then get, get the cost of the CPU instructions on that as a sort of a proxy for the cost of it. And then of course, varying the size of how much memory I request to grow, and so get sort of a, per page cost, because as of right now, that's you have one per each page, and so.
Okay. I guess. Anything else right now?
Macro is almost done.
This is for the. There. What's missing?
I mean, just the final testing of the, make sure that things are generated correctly. But the actual testing code itself is done. It's just getting rid of the boilerplate at this point. And I'm going to be meeting today with Mike, who wrote the extensive docs on simulation testing, and get his opinion on it. And his feedback later today. But I don't know if that needs to be written down, but just as a another thing to know.
Okay. Cool. So, Bo, anything we should write down?
Yeah. So for contract runtime, the singleton way for exposing cache is usable. I made a pull request to merge to your pull request, but we seems to have still undecided whether to use a trait object or use singleton for all the caches. Max, do you think we have a conclusion yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think you also need to drive this conversation, actually make it arrive to the conclusion. But I think where we arrived with it is Evgeny and me and Misha seems to be on the same page. It doesn't need to be statically global singleton. but it needs to be passed somehow to the runtime right at the beginning. Is it how we agreed, right? And it needs to be behind the trait, because so the goal here is to make sure that the runtime can compile without RocksDB, or like without dependency on a store crate, because right now it's lightweight and we want to keep it this way. So for that, you would need to create a trait, which is going to be something like, I don't know, on this cache trait, and implement structure that has access to the store, implements this trait, and pass it to the runtime. So that's.
I seem to not agree with that, because we have a store trait and our in-memory DB and RocksDB is both implement of the database trait. The store is only based on the store is only based on database trait that's independent of RocksDB. So if the singleton cache is only based on the store, it does not depend on RocksDB.
Well, I mean, during the compilation, RocksDB is going to be compiled, because RocksDB is part of the store crate. So if we create a dependency on a store crate in runtime, when you compile the runtime, RocksDB is going to be pulled in and compiled together. But also, even if it wasn't the case, even if RocksDB was another separate crate, we still want to keep runtime clean, not even make it dependent on the store crate itself, because I mean, who knows? Maybe later it's not going to be part of the store. Maybe it's going to be flat file or in-memory file or something, you know, like which implements on this cache. So that's why we want to separate it for the trait here.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Do I understand correctly that Max, your idea that cache is essentially is not what we have like a store as a database interface. Instead, it has to be an interface on its own, and then it could be implemented to either store or either some other mechanism.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like the idea is. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. And it's not. And another just for me to be on the same page with everybody. And idea was to not pass this cache explicitly into runtime function, but instead have a global variable with a singleton, which essentially is the current like cache instance.
So we had this discussion whether we want to do the singleton, and Misha raised the valid argument that well, it's not going to be. Well, I mean, there are two reasons for not to do it as a singleton. Well, first one is that runtime. If you look at the code runtime of the runtime right now, it's basically implementation. It's basically spec for the implementation. Like you read the methods of the runtime, and that's almost the spec. It's almost the protocol. And so having on this cache is also kind of the part of the protocol going to be right now. I mean, it's not going to be enforced through the protocol, but it's what all the clients would need to implement. So we want to make it explicit and make it the part of the runtime interface rather than having some global object that just accessed by the runtime, like it's like a file system or something. So that, you know, when you read the runtime signatures of the methods, you understand, you know, you see that it goes into the on this cache and grabs something. So that's like one reason. Another reason is that with the singleton, it's not going to might not be possible to do like dependency injection on the runtime, or it's not going to be as nice to do, or it's just like dependency injections are just easier when you do it into the constructor or the method. And we want to do dependency injection here because we want to cut dependency from the store crate. So that's why it needs to be
It also anti-pattern to like a singleton, and like just because tests are more complicated to replace the singleton, and like unit tests, and they all need to like wrap there.
That was the concern I shared yesterday about testing as well. So if you want to write a unit test, then replacing singleton is not very easy.
That's true. Yeah. So that's why it needs to be passed either as an argument to the runtime constructor or to the apply method, whichever you choose. I mean, Evgeny, I think, suggested to pass it as the argument to the constructor of the runtime, right? Yeah, so that's what you need to do. Well,
so is that looks similar to what Misha had made a pull request. I think that's pretty similar to what we suggest to do here. Is that correct?
Maybe I haven't seen his pull request. I mean, we need to make sure, yeah, that there is a trade. I mean, I haven't seen his pull request, so I cannot say. Trade object VM runner. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, but I don't know. Let's see. Actions cache. It might be. Yeah, so it might be the case that you need to just like take it over from him. Maybe merge it or maybe add some changes. I see. He might not be actually passing it. I don't see him passing it to the runtime. He passes it to the runner somehow directly. I don't know how. Crash rhythm compile.
I think maybe he took it from the try update, which is kind of.
Oh yeah.
Probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, we don't. Let's not do it.
Okay.
Like let's. So you need to do almost like what he did, but do not expose store on the try update.
Okay, I'll take over his pull request and do that change.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I'm probably like corrupt it into Arc because it's now going to be part of runtime.
Okay, sounds viable. Okay, Bo, anything else?
The most important find is about the EVM volatility. So there are two reasons called the volatility, both in like the method how we calculate the EVM cost per contract deploy, and the one is EVM cost is always constant, no matter how big is the state size, but near cost will increase as there is more state. Like the first 10 blocks take significantly less cost than the last 10 blocks if I test like 100 or 1000 blocks. So the solution is to also create a 200,000 accounts, each with EVM contract deployed, and measure should based on this state. So this is considered like our base state of the runtime param estimator. And the second issue is the EVM cost seems not linear with near gas cost when deploying a contract. It was linear if the number is within like same magnitude. Like the several contracts I tested before are both several hundred EVM gas, and only see them, the near gas is linear to EVM gas. But now I find out different magnitude of EVM contracts from the balancer repo, and overall they do not look linearly. I posted in the EVM channel. So next step, I plan to experiment whether the size of EVM contract is linear to the near gas cost to deploy such contract. And there is also an approach like to tweak the EVM crate. They have a similar structure as our runtime fees config. They call it a schedule struct. It may be I should tweak some EVM gas per byte and like per memory usage to make it linear and correctly reflect how much near gas will be used.
Okay. I'll, Bo, anything else from you? Because I think I have something from pre-sick time on myself.
I think that's all from update from the last week. Can I have a look at what is in the last week again?
So yeah, this EVM cost volatility.
Okay, so almost that's it. Some rewrite and refactor to the code based on Ilya's comments, but no functionality difference.
Okay. Okay, so before my sick leave, what I did, the last thing I did was an investigation of APIs available to applications to measure the amount of disk I/O, and I found that that Linux kernel has an API called Netlink, and this Netlink is pretty universal API for various user-learned to kernel communication, but one of the function which actually shown to be working was actually ability to request how much the particular process how many bytes the particular process has read and has written using read and write system calls. So it seems to be a viable approach for measuring input output by the process. So that's, I guess, the path which are going to pursue and to use for the effort of taking input output costs into account in our gas estimation.
Just that you also sync with Evgeny. Yeah.
How long do you think you can do this?
Well,
I wanted to upgrade. He's like end of next week, or at least like be ready to have a final phase.
Well, I think I can I had some working prototype of Rust code which can do that already. So I have that code. I don't have it productized yet. I think I need like a few days, so we can coordinate. Maybe we can share what I have, and we decide on. I think the hard part after this step, this was like a technical step in a sense that we can compute how much data was actually transferred to the disk, but then we need to map it to the cost, and this part is a little bit more non-trivial. So I plan to do that tonight and tomorrow, and
cool.
And so we can sync on that and see how it will go.
Yeah, so I'm going to rerun the estimator with like large state. So we fixed the bug on Genesis populate. So I'm generating like one of the. So I'm gonna use baseline at like 64 megabytes of accounts. So like 64 million accounts as a try. While running it on like same amount, so pretty small. But it should increase the lookup cost and writing cost. And then I'm trying to run time comparison with RAM mapped database versus like disk SSD. and with 16 million accounts to see if I'll see more difference. But I enabled threading on RocksDB because I cannot figure out how to configure RocksDB to avoid this. So we'll see what numbers I can get. So probably gonna end. It will take entire today maybe for the time estimation and.
So again, let me clarify. So you believe that you found the reason why we actually stop after 200,000 accounts, or it's
Yeah. We fixed it already. Like that was because it was running with single threaded RocksDB, and we hit a memtemp table write limit, and it just stalls all the writes. I posted it in a contract runtime channel.
But it kind of doesn't much in my head. So how I think the number of threads used by RockDB is mostly like optimization. It's it did just define
So
how it
doesn't
behave,
do
right?
compaction. So pretty much RocksDB getting stuck once it runs out of available buffer. So because it doesn't do compactions, it doesn't flush the data into tables right now because it's done probably in a different thread. So it needs to be moved to. We either allow extra thread but still disable compaction and then manually call in flashing of this data between the measurements.
Okay. So but it looks like a bug in RocksDB because it kind of it doesn't make sense. So you can write that many records and afterwards it just gets stuck. It doesn't look right.
Well, it uses like an in-memory table, or like kind of mem table, and then it flashes them to actual like SST level tables in a different thread, and then it just swaps mem tables while other threads are writing it into like another like compact tables, and more threads around compaction on top of the existing disk tables. So we disabled all threads, so we only have one blocking thread that's controlled by the Rust that never gives control to RocksDB.
Mm-hmm.
So we only have a one blocking operation is to write it into mem table of RocksDB, and it doesn't have a thread to move it out of RocksDB mem table into SST table. So it's limited by the amount of mem tables RocksDB can do. And for some reason, parameters from Rust are not picked up by RocksDB config. So I cannot increase the number of these mem tables.
So it practically means that we not properly disabled multi-threaded configuration of RocksDB because what we created is not a functional RocksDB.
Yeah, it's not functional right now.
Actually, RocksDB is designed to have at least one background flashing thread and one background compaction thread to properly work. How we disable RocksDB thread is a hack, and it will eventually trigger flash or compaction at some point when there is a huge data, and it will stuck. So RocksDB doesn't have a public documented or designed way for you to wave from these two threads. So what I can think is to still try to play with parameters to increase the compaction and flashing trigger to as big data as possible, so we don't trigger it. Otherwise, we have to spin up another thread to do the flashing. But if we introduce another thread ourselves, that also will cause volatility.
Yeah, right. I think the right approach would be to essentially explicitly invoke flashing after some amount of work performed. So that's, I guess, it doesn't have to be in a separate thread. It just have to happen sometime.
Yeah, I mean, flushing is the heavy thing. I mean, flushing is the one that actually triggers the disk write. So we have to be doing flushing, right?
No, I think
the problem
maybe
that we only have a main thread that controls both our code and rockdb, and in that main thread, I debugged into the rockdb some time ago. It was blocked on waiting conditional var. That's internal of rockdb, blocking on that conditional var to be set, and that conditional var is only set in the rockdb flushing thread, and there is no such thread, so it's blocked. So I think unless we can like fork rockdb and moving the flushing code from the separate thread into our main thread, we have no way to like unblock that wait on condition var.
So can you spawn a new thread in the middle of rocksdb, do the flashing with the blocking, wait, then once the flashing is done, we unblock the original thread.
But unless you remove that line to wait on conditional var, it's still blocked, because our code will call some rockdb code, and the rockdb code will call that function and finally go to that line to wait on that conditional var.
Yeah, but it's actually interesting if this conditional variable is oh yeah, it's a conditional variable. Okay, so I guess what we can do as a workaround, we could reactivate like a per thread counting, where we ignore certain threads, for example, the background thread, but it still will introduce the volatility. So like, seems we don't have a good answer here, unless we'll probably be able we'll be properly able to disable concurrent execution in rocksdb, or not use rockdb at all. That's I guess another approach, and implement the storage on top of something else. But I'm not sure how sensible our costs will be in such a case.
I mean, we need to be using rocksdb because, I mean, the fact that it's doing compaction should be affecting our storage. And, you know, if we use flat files, it's going to be completely different, you know, like order of magnitude difference. So storage backend matters.
Yes, correct.
What if we have a background thread, but manually trigger compaction after every operation and count it towards the cost?
Yeah,
so I think we're reusing testbed for every measurement separately, so it creates a new instance of rocksdb every time. And maybe we can do this, and it's not going to be like compacting the original tables. So long as we can wait until the compaction is complete.
Yeah, and it's right. Control. The only problem is that which cost we attribute this compaction phase.
Well, let's say we completed writes. So it's still multi-threaded. We just need to make it available to not trigger compaction automatically before the operation. And then once we manually trigger it, so it's not in the middle of the, well, maybe it's not a big, but compactions are not random, right? They are triggered by some logic. So if you're running same data, it should trigger at the same time. It's just a scheduler of two threads, not very like predictable.
Yes. I guess you're correct. If we'll be able to explicitly request for compaction and wait for it, then I think it's secure.
But I have a question. The compaction is hard to like attribute it to specific times of transaction. Like if you run 100 transaction, it didn't trigger compaction and the cost is small. And if you run 101 transaction, it happens to trigger a compaction. That should be averaged to each transaction.
Yep.
Yeah, that's correct. That's why what we shall be counting the amount of transaction where we do have to trigger the compaction.
There's like extra cost on every operation that we'll need to like include.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like adding a base instead of removing the base.
Okay, so I guess we're a little bit over time with this meeting. So I committed the status, and we probably shall have like a 1-2 minute break and proceed with next one. So I'm stopping screen sharing.
Evgeny, do you have anything for the next meeting?
Yeah, we can talk through Bootstrap and the ecosystem.
Okay.
Yeah, let's take like 2 minutes and then. All right. Okay, let's start. So there's not much work happened on the contracts themselves, but there is a bunch of proposals that I have. I was like in the background was working on committing some of these PRs, and not much was done. So some of them is done, some of them needs to be updated, and maybe a few needs review. But so I was talking to Sasha, and one of the idea that was born is to actually have some live tokens on the mainnet, and right now we pretty much have only one token standard that is implemented, the fungible token standard that is used by Rainbow Bridge as well, but the rest of the stuff is not close. So we don't have a good fungible or non-fungible token implementation that is complete. And also the current fungible token due to state rent or like stake makes it more complicated to use. So then we received some feedback from community about usage of allowance, and so I was started to think about two things. So first, I wrote an app about bootstrapping native Near ecosystem, and I suggested that we in-house implement the following. So we have fungible token factory, so that's already exists on a testnet as a demo, and it actually allows to deploy fungible tokens. Then we should probably build Uniswap or adopt one of the from hackathons. Like there is a submission on Uniswap from a hackathon. This is needed so you can actually use tokens on the network, because right now they pretty dead when you cannot do this, cannot use them except for transferring. And building a Uniswap natively, then with an EVM can demonstrate how to use fungible tokens in a sync environment. So Uniswap by itself is fairly simple. The UI can be taken from original Uniswap if the license permits. Otherwise, we can later just re-implement it. Then we need the support for fungible tokens, which we need to finalize an app and later build the auction on top of fungible tokens, which is pretty much a marketplace for NFT where you can list an NFT and bid on top of NFT. And that will demonstrate how to use NFTs. So that once we get closer to the bridge, and we decide where to keep assets. So if we keep them only within EVM, then it's going to be silent and the entire ecosystem going to be just a side chain of Ethereum, which is not what we want it to be. We want to be actually have a native ecosystem as well, and not just an EVM single instance that cannot communicate with other. So that's why having some native stuff which is do not require complicated composability will make it easier for community to iterate on native implementations. So this is a suggestion, and there's no timeline for this, but just once we actually have the cycles, we start to build this, and I don't think making it through bounty will make sense, well, just because we need to think about some extra security features and just use the best practices. And that made me think about fungible tokens and how to integrate them into something like a Uniswap, because fungible tokens are essentially require the deposit for every transfer, and then there's a callback. So I created another proposal, which is the main goal was to remove allowance, because in theory, the only reason for allowance is for the contract to be able to take access offline. But in reality, with a sync environment, you don't really need to provide this capability because of the you need locks, and then you need to have ownership. So the async model makes allowance way too more complicated. So the proposal here is similar to original space idea, except it doesn't require any runtime changes. And the way it works is because you initiate transaction not from the exchange side, but you initiate it from your token contract. So the idea, you can call transfer with safe. It takes a receiver, and what it does, it attaches the callback to itself at the end that resolves the safe. So when it starts, it takes money out, locks it under your account into this particular safe to be withdrawn by the receiver. And then it calls the receiver to take out funds and provide them this safe ID, and they can withdraw it from the safe to the accounts they want. And it allows to chain it with another transfer with safe if they want to. So basically, once their call is dropped, panicked, or like finish it in any other way, the callback is called to resolve the safe, and it just puts this money back to your account if they are remaining in a safe. So with this operation, you can implement pretty much a Uniswap, and that's enough to have. And it doesn't require any complicated logic to be added either to runtime or on the other side. And then there's a receiver side interface, which is kind of a contract that getting called needs to implement, and it can do variable operations. So the benefit of this approach is, first of all, we've completely removed the allowance from the token, which makes the storage per account predictable. So you know how much storage you need on every account to be part of the token. So let's say it's some kind of number of like 200 bytes. You can estimate how many accounts you can have on this contract before you run out of storage. And then you may have some potential logic on how to decide whether to require a funding or not require a funding for a new account, or manage the storage in some other way. But this we'll discuss tomorrow regarding to attaching the extra deposit every time. So this is two things I wanted to discuss, and we can go to either one of them for questions. So I'll link them here.
Yeah, I did, to be honest, I didn't understand. I did not understand it. 122.
The token standard?
Yeah.
So the idea is, okay, yeah, I didn't get into details. The idea...
But before I say it, can you explain what you actually mean by allowance? Because I might be thinking one thing and you saying another
within
thing.
fungible token, we have an allowance to like grant allowance for the given...
To withdraw. Okay, that's kind of allowance. Okay.
To withdraw. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm trying to remove this extra map from fungible token.
Oh, so that's basically the map.
So the idea, yeah. So this probably explains it the best. So instead of having a permanent allowance, we introduce one-time temporary allowance for the duration of the transaction.
Interesting. I wonder how you would give this. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So the way it works is you call transfer is safe, and then you give receiver as a destination. So for example, Uniswap. So Uniswap is getting called from the token. Uniswap can verify that it's called from the token. It gets a safe ID that it can use to then call back the token to call withdraw from safe. And to put it into any other account, to their own account or some like third-party account. And even if Uniswap panics, tokens are safe, they're not locked, because once they exit the loop of this function, once they complete it, so this can return a promise as well, like their callback or like some other withdrawals. Then
so how you go ahead.
Then it gets back to token contract at the end, and it's called, this is like a callback to resolve the safe, and it removes it from temporary storage.
So how do you make safe ID non-forgeable? I mean, when we were doing it on the protocol level.
Oh, well, you don't really need to, because safe ID just verifies the ownership of the safe. So safe has an owner, which is a Uniswap. So only Uniswap can call to withdraw from safe.
Okay.
So there is no reentrancy, because safe ID, it's just an identifier for the transaction ID. And then you have protection like this, which is only Uniswap can call to withdraw from safe.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Okay, well,
so you cannot pass the safe somewhere, yes, to someone in order for them to withdraw. So you pretty much have to wrap into your own safe if you want to.
Got it. So safe ID doesn't give any kind of it doesn't give any kind of rights. It's just a piece of information for the callback. That's what it is.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, gotta read it.
So safe ID by itself. Yeah.
And anyone who gonna join the meeting tomorrow also needs to read it, I think.
Well, not necessary. Just tomorrow discussion gonna be more generic around like how to actually remove this kind of payable requirements. I still have no idea.
Okay.
To have it work. So
why do we have a permanent allowance in the first place? What does it do?
It was easier to implement it this way. Like you have first transaction to say, okay, Uniswap can withdraw from my account, and then you call Uniswap, and it will withdraw from your account.
I see.
And this one chains them together and make them not lose the tokens on the fly. So another option for this to consider was without safes, is like you call something like, hey, Uniswap, here's a few 500 tokens, do something with them. And then if Uniswap panics, then 500 tokens are lost. So that's an issue. For example, you didn't attach enough gas to Uniswap. And that cannot be properly chained. So in this case, how Uniswap, for example, can work is when you deposit to a pool, you actually, Uniswap is on the token. And when you exchange, you withdraw from Uniswap and you give some other token to Uniswap. So if there was no extra payments for account creation, then the entire thing would be like extremely simple. Well, not as simple as Ethereum one, but much simpler. And right. And for this part, that's pretty much like we need this to have working examples for some simple stuff that people can use. Like Uniswap is a good example. Cool.
All right, cool. Thank you, Evgeny.
Yeah, cool. I don't have much updates on your SDK. It still needs to be cleaned up. So one thing I wanted, as we discussed, is if Vlad Frolov, you have time to help with Near SDK eventually, I think it would be good to actually start working on this together to polish it so we can both improve documentation and upgrade it to be better Rustish, so you don't make mistakes when you're developing it. So think about all the common issues that we have.
Yeah, sure.
And trying to
yeah,
design.
I'm right now onboarding with the bridge, so I'm a bit over my capacity right now, but I will keep in mind. And if you I am always open to reviewing ideas and pull requests. I just don't promise I will write any code.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not now, right? It's kind of in the future, and it might be seen as like an extension of the node interfaces, right? Because you're also interfacing with the node, but for the contracts, and we need the Rust code there is non-trivial, especially because of the macroses. There is lots of manipulations with Rust that are very you need to understand the most recent Rust language things there to be able to to be able to have good near SDK. So
as it's true, but from what I've what we were talking about, I guess we were mostly considering improving the sort of standard library of near SDK, not the macroses. But even with the macroses, I guess I looked into them, and it's not magic for me. So
that's exactly the point why we want you to look into it. but also we want to go ahead. Sorry.
I was thinking if you want to be a co-owner as well.
I guess I am, or
I don't know. Added you as a owner of Near SDK as well.
I thought that I'm already on co-owners, but no,
not maybe
really.
SDK.
Anyway, yeah, maybe not this one. Maybe Borsch.
Okay. Yeah, Borsch.
Yeah, so something to think on. Yeah, basically, you worked with NoSTD, at least you're familiar with it, and we need to rewrite it to work with NoSTD. And we could make it as a bounty, but it seems like it's just too complex to be a bounty for people.
Well, I have a person who is actively looking into it. He has no great experience with Rust, but he is very interested in this topic and in Near in general. So he's trying his abilities.
So can we get him on Borsch
challenge for him
to start?
Yeah, he actually started with Borsch. Yeah.
Oh yeah, cool. Can you also? So you're basically gonna supervise him and make bounties for him?
Yeah.
Or,
so it's as far as I know, it's not super full-time job for him, but at least he has some progress there in understanding. I'll keep in touch with him.
Okay. Yeah, so we do have. I think we do have a bounty for Borsch. So if you can make it.
Yeah. So we have
so he can apply to this.
Yeah, I suggested him to apply, but he said that once he has a clear path and idea how exactly he will approach the full full-blown solution, only then he will apply, because he feels
Got
like, well, he may stuck there and block others on doing this. So
cool.
I see. Okay, cool.
All right. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
right.